Yes, hello, welcome one and all to Into the Night, a Moon Knight podcast where we do everything in the name, talk about the night sky, and Moon Knight, and a bunch of other crap, not including news because there was none this week. I'm one of your hosts, Connor, and I'm here with Ray. How you doing, Ray?
Hey, how you going, Connor? How are you?
I'm doing bloody good because this week we're dropping not one, but 2 episodes on your head.
Yep.
Coming up either before or after we release this one, it's an episode with Chris from Defenders TV podcast, all about the good old Rack Knight issue 2 that dropped this week. And today we have, right now for this episode, we have reviewing Moon Knight Volume 1, Issue 1. So it's a bloody cool week this week, I'm telling you what. Yeah,
this is going to be quite a big issue of sorts. This is kind of the title series that kind of kicked everything off, isn't it, Connor? I mean, we've had cameos before with Moon Knight making appearances in the Hulk magazine and in other comic books like the Defenders and the Amazing Spider-Man. But this was his very own solo title, so a lot kind of hinged on how Doug Moench and Bill Sienkiewicz set things up here, and we'll be looking at this first issue.
Yeah, so it's a bloody big one, and I think we're going to spend the majority of the issue on that. Before we get into that and its importance, what you been up to, Ray? What you been reading? What's going on?
Yeah, things have been well, Connor. I can't believe. Can you believe it's December already?
I know.
So we are hurtling towards the end of the year. I've just been reflecting, and I'm thinking maybe, I don't know if we should do a show towards the end of the year, Connor, just maybe a bit of a recap on what we've achieved this year. I mean, it's been a bumper year for podcasting. I mean, we had 2 massive interviews with both Max Bemis and Jason Burrows. We've had the Isle of Ra kind of sessions. We kind of stopped a little on the bare bones, but we've added a lot more different flair to the show. So yeah, just been reflecting on that because it's been a big year.
Yeah, no, actually I've been doing much the same, and I've been I think probably wait till a bit end of the year as well when we recap on that. I also want to throw it to the audience to talk about what they want to see from us in 2019 as well, because you know.
Yeah, that's a very good point as well. We do love to hear feedback. I know you and I, we've discussed as well, we've got some things cooking as well that potentially may surface for ITK next year, so that's always very exciting as well. Yeah, I mean, it would be great to hear from the loonies as, what they'd like to see more of, and I don't know, maybe more guests next year, Connor. Yeah.
I mean, I was thinking lately we haven't had a bit of an Isle of Ra for a while, so I want to hit up anyone listening, podcasters, listeners, whoever you are, hit us up about that. I think we definitely want to see more of that in the new year. I think those are a big hit. I at least hope they are, because they're great to record.
Oh yeah, they're a lot of fun, aren't they? And they kind of deviate a little bit from Moon Knight, unless of course the Isle of Ra person has Moon Knight in their collection. But it's just a great way to learn more on your fellow loonies and with comics out there in general. I think the last one we had was yourself and Dustin Coldcase Kurtz. That was a very cool one, actually. Dustin brought in some very diverse...
Spooky.
Yeah, spooky. Yeah, almost Halloween tinged. Yeah. But reading wise, I'm still catching up with my current pull list. So I've only just read Uncanny X-Men #1. Had you read that as well, Connor?
Yeah, it didn't quite grab me. What did you think?
Yeah, I mean, I heard the feedback that people felt it fell a little flat. I thought it was okay. I actually enjoyed it. Maybe it was because I came in with lower expectations after having heard all the reviews. But I mean, look, it kind of played on the trope of the mutants and this vaccine and the senator and all that. It kind of played up that a little, and look, it had Multiple Man. I mean, he's one of my favourites, so it's good to see. He looks like he has an integral part in the first arc at least, so that will make things very interesting. But I can see what you mean, how it kind of might have been probably not fulfilling the expectations of most of the listeners or most long-time X-Men fans.
Yeah, I just really liked Tom Taylor's X-Men Red. I'm still sticking with Uncanny because I'm definitely keen to see where it goes. Some of the covers they pulled up are wild. So yeah, I've only read issue 1, but I've got issue 2 and 3 sitting there. So I mean, I wasn't super sold on Avengers No Surrender as well, but I ended up really liking that. I got Immortal Hulk out of that. So
Yeah, that's right. Avengers No Surrender. That was kind of that's a good example of. Look, it's not groundbreaking, or it isn't a Jonathan Hickman kind of, 10 years in the making kind of thing. But it was just a fun kind of event that I don't know. Yeah, I'm with you. It was just enjoyable the whole way through. So it proves that you can have a popcorn kind of event and it not necessarily having to. Cause ripples in the Marvel Universe, for years to come. Just something that was fun, and enjoyable as you read it. How about yourself, Connor? Anything exciting that you've read over the last week?
Yeah, it's a pretty good week. Ironheart dropped with Riri Williams.
Okay.
A bit wordy, bit of a first issue, but I'm still in love with it. We got Man-Eaters 3, probably like the best book with political commentary on the shelves at the moment. Call that one out. Love it. Straight Bullets, Sunshines, and Roses. If you love crime, it's worth reading. All of that. It's just, it's still doing great things after like 20 years or something crazy.
Yeah.
These Savage Shores too, probably one of the best debuts of the year. We got
who's in that? Sorry, These Savage Shores.
Yeah, it's a Vault comic thing about vampires in India in what is it, like the 1900s?
Okay.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. Written by Ram V with the artist Sumit Kumar.
Wow, cool. Sounds good.
Love and Fence and Coda. We got Rack Knight this week, which we'll be talking about tomorrow. We got Books of Magic, Coda, Fence, Batgirl. Loving all of those. Black Hammer got a library edition. Those nice covers.
I saw that. That looks awesome. I think it retails in Australia for those listening. For about $95, but it's a hardcover, right? Library edition. First 13 issues, definitely a must. It would just make the art pop even more, I reckon.
Yeah, which is a series I need to catch up on. I probably haven't read the last few issues of what is it, Age of Doom? Yeah.
Oh yeah, I haven't read that at all. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so Loonies, as you can tell, Konoshu is way more well versed in a diverse range of comics than yours truly. But that's great to hear, isn't it? I mean, Connor, we should probably do an Isla Ra for you at some stage. It would probably be very difficult for you to kind of cull that down to 4.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to start planning now. Even if we release that one in the next year, I'll probably still be thinking.
Yeah. Just a couple other things you just reminded me as well. Is Shuri? I've gotten into Shuri, the Marvel release. Very good. My gosh, I didn't expect that. Romero on art, but the writing was really, really nice. Good pacing, good fleshing out of the characters. Really interesting stuff. So I'm looking forward to probably picking that up as a regular now. And during the Black Friday, I guess, comic sales, I picked up a limited series 2001 of Elsa Bloodstone, just called Bloodstone.
Oh!
Yeah. I don't know. I find her like a really cool character. Ever since Next Wave and her stint in Battle World during the Secret Wars, I think she's just been great. I mean, she's popped up here and there in Jessica Jones and such. But this is an early 2000s series. I've only just scratched the surface. Very kind of, I guess, still very 90s because it's early 2000. But yeah, a very, very fun read as well.
Yeah, well, I adore Elsa Bloodstone, so I didn't even know they made that.
Yeah, no, me too. She's blonde in it at this stage, and she hasn't got kind of that sass that she has, with the trench coat and her weapons and her kind of, I don't know, just confidence in her ability. She seems, I don't know, this must be very much, I don't know, not early days, but they're still trying to figure out her overall character. So yeah, interesting stuff. Should be. Oh, and also, I'm reading an old run of Hercules, Twilight of the Gods, which is I think written by, if I'm not mistaken, it might be Bob Layton. Crazy. It's a cosmic tale, and it's kind of funny because it draws upon Hercules. He obviously likes his drink, and he's on medication because he's a bit loopy. So it's a very different sort of Hercules that I'm familiar with. But yeah, I'll stick with it. It seemed like a fun enough run. So those are probably the comics at the moment. There's a bit of a hole with no Moon Knight, I guess, Connor, isn't there?
Yeah, bloody oath. Not a single drop of news this week.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a small bit of news. I guess I'd love to get into it more with Chris on our episode upcoming from Defenders TV podcast on the cancellation of Daredevil.
Yeah, huge. But
yeah, it's funny. It's made a huge impact, but it's kind of like the writing was on the wall a little, wasn't it?
Yeah, we lost 2 in a week. It was kind of like you just kind of watching, waiting for it.
And this is, I mean, and it being Daredevil, this kind of reaffirms for me that it actually was not because of, say, the quality of Iron Fist or because Luke Cage and Iron Fist are smaller or lesser tier characters. They got rid of the big one, Daredevil. So if you get rid of Daredevil, surely we'll be losing Jessica Jones and Punisher next year, most likely.
Yeah, well, I guess you'll just wait for their seasons to drop, and then we'll,
It's a bit morbid, isn't it? I mean, because everyone that will be watching season 3 of Jessica Jones and season 2 of Punisher will be almost 99% sure that they'll be cancelled. So it's kind of like weird watching a whole season just kind of knowing that their time is up.
Yeah, and how are those going to end too? Because I know some are in the middle of filming. Are they going to try and change it up or something? Or
True, because they were well into it. I think I know Jessica Jones is in post-production, and Punisher wrapped up filming ages ago as well. So I don't know. I mean, they could go down the route of Iron Fist and Luke Cage, where they were still setting up stuff, but then that's it. See you later. We won't see. And what do you think, kind of, then this would mean for us Looney fans and Moon Knight?
Not lucky enough now, because I don't think Netflix is something that's ever going to be tapped again with the Disney streaming service. So I think we're going to have to wait for creators in the deep in the MCU and the movies and stuff to write him in there, or to get a Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. type thing with Ghost Rider. So I think it's kind of another knockback where it's like,
I know,
it's a slither of hope now.
Yeah, exactly, isn't it? Everyone, well, not everyone, most people were banking or preferring Moon Knight to show up in Netflix because that was just the arena, wasn't it? We had the street level characters. It was dark. It allowed for a lot more violence and a lot more graphic content, but that's been squashed, hasn't it? So I don't know. I mean, I'm reading various things. People are adamant that it's none of these characters are going to surface again in the Disney streaming service. I've heard stuff that Marvel intend to use these characters as to what capacity we don't know. All that's kind of in flux, and I'm trying to figure out what the hell will happen to our mate Mooney. And it is hard, isn't it? I think we just I think that our biggest chance would be, I don't know, I'm thinking still the Disney service, or again you'd say the MCU, but I still can't see Moon Knight in the MCU. I don't know. You look at all the characters in the MCU; they're big hitters. They're larger than life characters, and the lesser ones you just don't see there. So yeah. Anyway, I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, but RIP Daredevil. probably one of my favourite top 5 shows of the year, Season 3 especially.
Oh,
Just
absolutely.
knocked it out of the park like nothing else.
Oh, performances just by D'Onofrio, Charlie Cox, of course, Deborah Ann Wall, and massive. Also Wilson Bethel, who played Bullseye.
Jay Ali, who plays Nadim.
Yes, very good as well. And let's not forget Alice Eve in Iron Fist playing Typhoid Mary.
Yeah.
I thought she was absolutely brilliant in that. And it's so kind of heart-wrenching that that's the only kind of depiction of Typhoid Mary or Bullseye that we'll see for some time at least. It's Anyway, it's the nature of the industry, I guess. So we'll just have to grin and bear it.
Yep. Well, I guess stay tuned for more on that. Maybe we'll hear something about Moon Knight, news-wise, show-wise, anything-wise.
Yeah, we still have our loony Alex Lumen churning out some films for us, and
We got a Christmas special coming up.
yeah, there's a Moon Knight appearance. I had been looking ahead at the phases of the moon as well, Konishu, and we do have another film/TV review coming up towards December, so at the end of December. So we'll have to figure out what we do for that. But maybe it might be another case of looking at another fan film. I think that would be good.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, well, okay, well, why don't we just take a quick break? We'll just hear from one of our fellow collective members, and kind of how about we come back and we review the hell out of this Moon Knight Volume 1, Issue 1.
Hi, this is Chris.
And this is Brian.
And we are the hosts of Inner Demons, the Ghost Rider podcast.
And you can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, and other podcast apps for all your Ghost Rider needs.
Right on.
Yes, welcome back, loony listeners. You are listening to Into the Night, a Moon Knight podcast. We are in our LUNAR-PICK review, and it being a waning crescent, we are looking at a classic run. And as mentioned a couple of times before, we made a bit of an error on our behalf. We kind of overshot the mark, and we totally missed chronologically, the debut of Moon Knight Volume 1, Issue 1, which was released in August 1980. So I think we were up to 1981, so we made a bit of a mistake there, but we're coming back. It's, as you mentioned, Connor, being our 75th episode.
Not bad.
It's not bad, isn't it? We've got quite a seminal issue here to review. Now, before, Connor, I ask you to just shout out the details for this comic. You can actually access this issue on either a single issue or floppy. It's still out there. I'm sure you can hunt one down. It's also available in trade in a couple of iterations. One of it is the Essential Collection, which I think is long out of print. It's a black and white one. I believe it's volume 2 of that. And there's also Epic Collections, volume 2, which is not Bad Moon Rising, Shadows of the Moon, volume 2. And that is a reprint in colour of Moon Knight issue 1, number 1, as well as I'm sure you can find it on Kindle or Comixology. Just check that out so you can get yourself a digital copy. We'll actually add in our show notes a link to an Amazon link where you can actually purchase it via the Kindle store, which it will still work for Comixology as well if you use a Comixology reader. But that will also just help us, the show, as well. If you buy through that link, it will, leave us a little bit of coin there to keep the lights running on this show. But yeah, keep an eye out for it. So anyway, Konishu, we have this massive issue with some big names.
Oh, yeah.
Let's run through the credits.
The big hitters. So, yes, it was August 1980. We had Doug Moench. God, I've already forgotten. On writing duties, Bill Sienkiewicz. On artist duties, Sienkiewicz and Frankie S., which might also be Sienkiewicz. As inkers, we had T. Orzechowski.
Good luck.
On letters, and B. Sharen as our colorist, Denny O'Neil, of course, editor, and Jim Shooter was still leading Marvel at the time.
Yeah, the infamous Jim Shooter. Now, as you know, or for Looney listeners or listeners who haven't heard before, for our LUNAR-PICK review, what we do is we kick it off with a sliver, which is basically a real compact synopsis of the issue, just to give you a gist of what it's all about. Then Konoshu and I will just discuss some interesting points we found of it. They could range from the artwork, the technique, to the writing, to certain scenes or certain events that happen in the issue. And we'll cap that off with a moon rating, which is a highly convoluted system which has been devised. I'll try to make it as complicated as possible, all to do with the phases of the moon. So, Konoshu, do you mind if I give it a crack with a sliver?
By all means.
Okay, so in a few sentences, and this was probably the reason why I picked it, it's probably the easiest sliver out there. Loonies who love Moon Knight, this will sound like a broken record to you, but anyway, the sliver is basically, we have Mark, a mercenary with Bushmen in Egypt. He actually is against Bushman's MO of how he runs things. He bumps into Marlene and her dad. Her dad unfortunately dies at the hand of Bushmen. Mark fights Bushmen. Mark is left for dead. Mark is resurrected. And then we see Mark in New York City as Moon Knight with his other identities. And he runs into Bushmen again for one, I guess, final encounter for this issue at least. So that is pretty much the gist of it. Very interesting. Konoshu, I might throw it to you first. First of all, overall impressions. What did you think of this as basically it's a setup issue, isn't it, for the solo title?
Yeah, well, it's kind of, speaking of the legacy, how much it captured me the first time I read it, even for like an 80s issue, which, date easily.
Yep.
And very easily. The way it grabbed me obviously speaks to why I'm now doing a podcast on this character, which it didn't quite capture me as much the second time I read it. I definitely saw the flaws in it more, but I think this is still a very readable, accessible issue that just is a great origin story and sets up so much for this character. You can see why, like, after all this time, there's so much before this issue that we've covered that hasn't really stuck around, but this has, because it's just one hell of a kickstart.
Yeah, it's interesting because, I mean, it seems like we've been covering his, his classic run for so long now through the cameos, and he seems to have been well set and well kind of established already. And then so it's so funny, like so from 1975 all the way up to 1980, he's been appearing in stuff. His history, his origins, Egyptian origins, haven't been covered, but he seemed like a very fleshed out character already. So, albeit this being a first issue of the solo title, it was, I don't know, I just find a little strange that we take a step back and he's kind of fleshed out. I guess it's not that strange, but I mean, it's just weird thinking in hindsight that he was such a well-established crime fighter that we've been looking at through in all these issues, and now we kind of see what appears to be real-time, his origins. And one of the first things, actually, I thought, Connor, as well, was this. It had a very like Alan Quatermain, Indiana Jones kind of vibe. I thought that at the beginning, it's very different from other Marvel titles because it's all set in Egypt and with mercenaries. The backdrop is obviously kind of Egypt, and it had this kind of swashbuckling, almost kind of like the Phantom to me, kind of vibe to
it. Yeah, totally.
Did you pick
fighting
that
around in?
Yeah. Did you pick that like kind of up? It was a bit straight. It wasn't until the last 10 pages where he's in New York that we get the sense that he's a street level that we kind of know and that we've kind of seen in the cameos before. But this whole story, the origin story, which was really good, had a very different like Indiana Jones vibe to it.
Yeah, and yeah, I think you covered it exactly. It's like Phantom Indiana Jones, and it's just weird the way Frenchie and Mark interact, swashbuckling, and there's all this malicious stuff as well, and, fighting the locals, and war crimes, and all this weird stuff that has literally never been recounted except by a tiny bit by Lemire. Yeah,
well, that was another thing I was going to raise as well. We do get recounts of this origin in the different runs. Lemire, as you mentioned, he does a retelling of it, brilliantly drawn by Greg Smallwood. There's also a retelling in Charlie Houston's run of The Bottom, where the profile is presenting to the committee in the slides, almost a PowerPoint presentation of Mark, and we get a sense of his mercenary origins there. A lot more, for me, that was a lot more grounded in like realism, just the way that the art was depicted and stuff. So they have depicted it a few times throughout Moon Knight, but yeah, that is right, Connor. It's so funny. Like you do gloss over these details which Moench has put in here to show, for instance, Bushman, how callous he was. I mean, in an abstract level, we know that he's a terrible person because he kills Marlene's dad. And that was the big thing that set Mark off against Bushman. But what we don't see in the other iterations we see here is that we see Bushman line up all those villages and just mow them down, which was absolutely terrible to think about, So he's an absolute abomination of a person here. And, it was... I think it was kind of really well set up by Moench.
And Mark as well just kind of just blows up a bunch of grenades and throws a bunch of knives at people at the start.
But he does, doesn't he? Yeah.
He just goes all out. But they do kind of talk about that later, where they talk about that Marlene and Mark work to make him a better person. But I think I didn't realise this the first time I read it, however long ago. But there is obviously such a massive gap between the Egyptian shit and, like, when we return to the streets. Like, there must be, like, years of content there of getting the suit, getting the fortune, working to be different. And I just think about how little of that we've seen. Like, there was that werewolf issue in the Houston run, I think, took place in this time period. But I cannot, for the life of me, think of one thing that pops in between this period of, fighting in Egypt and the start of the second half of this issue.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. I didn't consider that, but yeah, you're absolutely right, because, I mean, even visually, you see towards the end of this Egyptian adventure, it's just Mark with that white cape around him. So he hasn't even formulated his Moon Knight appearance yet, which we later see when he's in New York, and rightly so, as you say, he has to have built up these identities, these connections with, I mean, we see Crawley and Jenna. We hear mention of Jenna's sons. I don't think they mentioned the names yet, but we know them as Rick and Ray. So we start getting the supporting characters, but all this network, it must have taken time for Mark to set this all up. We all know as well in the Origins that he uses his mercenary, his mercenary loot to fund his mansion and his Stephen Grant persona. So all that has to be established before he actually can go out onto the streets and be this Moon Knight. And as you say, I mean, even further to what you say, when Moon Knight is out and about in New York, he seems to have a reputation already. So he has been around for an undetermined amount of time. So what is interesting is to have maybe stories between then to actually see what happens. I think that would be very, very cool. Similar to the way what I found the most impressive with that recent modern run that we did, Conishu, with Warren Ellis and Declan Shalvey, was, you know how Warren Ellis introduced that Mark has all these artifacts or all these relics in his basement to do with Khonshu and with potentially battling the supernatural. I find that just such an untapped opportunity for writers to add to Moonlight lore. And similar to this period where he actually leaves Egypt and his formative years as Moon Knight. That would be really fun to see. It's
crazy. I think what we're really asking for here is almost like a Moon Knight year one. Which
yes, yeah.
It's just, I'm thinking about it. I can't believe one, it's not been done, but two, that I've never noticed it hasn't been done. You know, it's kind of like. So yeah, I'll post this in the group as well once this episode drops. So literally when people are hearing this. So like what we think about that and what we'd want to see in it. You know, that's pretty exciting and totally where we could go. But
it is. I'm racking my brain as we speak, trying to think of issues where we do see Mark just shortly after his trip to Egypt. I don't think we never get that. Here's a one Batman reference per episode, but we never get that almost montage where we see Mark Spector fully become the realised Moon Knight. As you see many depictions of Batman or Bruce Wayne becoming Batman. We never actually get that with Moon Knight. He seems to have been established, and we know. Ooh, is that Gibbsy?
Yeah, he's being very loud. Hear that crisp new audio quality.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that is crystal clear.
The meows. It's something all right, cat, isn't it?
Well, he knows what we're on about. You know, talking about Moon Knight. So fantastic point, Connor. I reckon that would be absolutely awesome to check out. I can't believe they haven't done that. Any loonies, please, if we are wrong by any chance, hey.
I don't know whether that was a wrong or a right. Pretty definitive, though.
Yeah. If we are wrong, please just let us know. But I'm thinking the miniseries is High Stranger's Resurrection War, that wasn't it. Moon Knight Volume 1, that's not it. Mark Spector.
Fist of Khonshu, get in. That's what we want to see.
Fist of Khonshu. Yeah.
That was Volume 2.
Yeah, but was that...
The one...
But that wasn't... I mean, I steer clear of that series, if I can. He was well established there, wasn't it? He was.
I think so.
Yeah. Very interesting. We should hear about that. Good point. Any other... Well, the other thing I was going to mention, just kind of, I mean, like, it's not as good a point as your last one, but I think I brought this up before. The death of, God, I can't remember his name. It's Mr. Dr. Alrain, the father of Marlene. Alrain. Over here, Moench has his jugular, bitten out by
I remember
Bushman.
This conversation.
Yeah. And distinctly in the Lemire run, I'm sure it's still fresh in a lot of our minds, Bushman stabs Dr. Alrain. So there have been very different iterations of what happened exactly.
In the recent... Was it Marvel Legacy, 3-page backup? He was just shot or something?
Yes, as well, yep. So there's at least 3 different ways that happened. And I'm not sure if there's any rhyme or reason for that. But it would seem to be a simple enough thing to have followed. Maybe they just thought this thing was ridiculous, looking back on it, that Bushman... tears his throat out with his teeth, which I think is actually quite horrifying and actually quite brutal. I if we're talking about Bushman being an absolute monster, I'd recommend you keep that fact in, wouldn't you? I mean, that would make him like
pretty full on. Yeah, no.
Yeah. So
in a macabre way, I love it.
Yeah. So again, so I guess I was just saying that the slight variations to the origins, but of course this is the origin. This is the one that started it all. This is actually the issue, isn't it? That Moench has decided to flesh out the Egyptian, the Khonshu aspects of it all. We don't know where he's going with his thoughts on the personalities of Mark Spector. So we do get introduced to Stephen Grant, Jake Lockley, and again, I think I mentioned before, Ralph Macchio, who was one of the editors or assistant editors, in an interview that he did mention that those identities were meant to be purely just like acting roles. Like so basically, Mark was a really good actor, and he would actually just fall into those roles, to tease out information where he needed, whether it be high society or in Jenna's diner. And later on, I think, I'm not sure if it was Doug Moench.
Hold on, just give me a sec to deal with this four-legged bastard. He's going off like mad.
All right, Loonies, cue a bit of background music here while we wait for Connor to deal with what seems to be a possessed cat, Gibbsy. It is a waning crescent, and cats are very important in Egyptian culture. So we may or may not see Connor back. Look, Gibbsy might well do a Bushman on Connor. I don't know. Could tear his throat out with his little cat jaws. We don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Oh, I think I hear movement.
Alright, I got him.
Excellent.
Yep. Let's continue on this fantastic point.
Excellent. We're keeping all that in, Connor. I've just filled everyone in whilst you were away, so...
Oh, fantastic.
No editing required.
That's the content they live for.
Exactly. So various... I actually forgot... Oh, yeah, the identities. So, I don't know whether it is actually Doug Moench down the line who decides to round things off and make them a mental thing with Mark... or if it is indeed another writer, but
because well, at least if it isn't mentioned as a mental illness, but it's definitely portrayed in a lot more serious way later on. This issue is kind of just flipping about, but there's a lot of well, not so much drama, but dilemma later in the issues when it's like Marlene questioning, she obviously likes Stephen the most, and she's questioning who's who and what's happening. So yeah, it definitely becomes a bigger thing, but here it's just kind of a mask.
Yeah, it is. And I'm thinking again to those cameo issues that we see of Moon Knight in the backup stories of the Hulk magazine, of even was it Marvel Spotlight. We do see, even back then, so Moench has chosen that Marlene does prefer Stephen Grant. Because back then, she prefers to speak or address Mark as Stephen back then, doesn't she? So actually, having said all that, so we aren't introduced to the identities here because they have been established already. I think what this issue does, what it brings to the table is this Egyptian background. Which Moench has never shown before, actually, in the previous cameos of Moon Knight.
Not even sort of hinted at it. It's just been here.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's funny, because remember the introduction of Moon Knight back in 1975 in Werewolf by Night. The whole idea that he was created was because he was a foil to the werewolf, so hence the moon. Had nothing.
Was it?
Sorry, the committee.
The committee. Hired him and threw him in some armor. Just went, "Yep, go get him."
Yeah, but the whole thing was that he was the foil because he was a moon, moon-related, character to a werewolf, and obviously full moons and all that, and Moon Knight wore silver, so all that had nothing to do with Egyptian or Egyptology at all, and it was only in now this issue that we're looking at that Moench actually puts puts two and two together, or puts Mark and Khonshu together, and decides to introduce Khonshu. So this is probably the first that we've seen of Khonshu.
Isn't that interesting? I'm racking my brain trying to think back to all those old issues. But yeah, he's just kind of here, isn't he? Popped in.
Yep, there's absolutely no...
And even here he isn't... he never really quite gets a voice in this book, though, does he? It's more the importance of the statue to Mark. And
yes.
I think when we hit 12 and 13, he even has that taken away from him, and there's a real focus on just how much that statue means to him. So, yeah, there was no definitive thing of Khonshu.
Yeah, it was...
being there and present within him as an actual figure.
Yeah, there was a... Yeah, that's right. He went a bit loopy, didn't he, when that statue had gone? But from memory, like, there were little inexplicable... Wasn't there some inexplicable supernatural things with the Khonshu statue, at least, back then? Like, you didn't see Khonshu, but there was things about, like, didn't the eyes glow or something? Or maybe I'm mixing that up with
maybe.
later. Yeah, but you're right. He definitely does not have the importance that Khonshu does now, especially with, I think Warren Ellis really did bring him to the fore with, the bird skull, which we kind of associate Khonshu now. Before then, it was just this particular statue, which Charlie Houston used to great effect in his volume of Moon Knight. But yeah. So I guess we can't underestimate the importance of this issue with really laying all the cards on the table for Moon Knight.
And then as well on the table, just immediately Crawley, Samuel.
Yes,
Samuels.
Yeah. Although, hey, actually said that, though, I mean, saying that, they were introduced in the cameos, weren't they?
Oh, were they?
Yeah. I can't remember the first issue I remember we reviewed one of the issues, and it was the first appearance of Crawley. And we're going, this is probably his very first time that he's actually... And they introduced him with the teabag. So he's been around in the cameos. So despite what I said towards the beginning of this episode, that they weren't introduced in this issue.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah,
shows how good my memory is.
Oh, look, yeah, it's all mixing together with mine as well. So, Looney's, I'm not exactly the most thorough researcher, but it's all just off the old noggin here. But it's. It's a good issue. What did you think of the pacing and the writing, Connor? Did you?
Yeah, well, I think. I guess we'll jump to the art after this, but it definitely has like hints of what would make this run so good about 12, 14 issues from now. I think it really hits its stride in every way around the first Scarlet issue.
Oh, yes.
Whatever that was called. That's really when it hits its stride, both thematically, narratively, writing, and artistically.
Yeah.
Just from the both of them. Writing, like I said, it's a lot wordier than it will be later on. Like, it's got that real dry narration, but even within that, Moench, who, I guess I got to look into it whether he was an author before this or something, there's definitely a lot more interesting. The description he gives of, like, the nighttime or the wind or the violence in those captions of, like, it's, just those kind of text boxes who aren't attached to a character, just narrating the scene, are immediately so much more interesting, and there's a lot less of the speech bubbles, the thought bubbles from Mark, thinking about the situation until right near the end when they're fighting. Let me just pull up an example real quick. Like, in the final fight, there's a lot more of it. Thinking about where that pops in, just an empty office and nothing, no one here. But before that, those yellow text boxes are just so much more descriptive and evocative than a lot I've read of the 80s. Yeah,
he's starting to do it, isn't he? And as you mentioned, around that 12, 13 issue mark, he really starts hitting the accelerator for that sort of style. But to me, it's still very conventional here. And, let's not forget as well, Moench has been writing... he's been writing actively since 75, so at least 5 years he's been in the game doing it. But those 5 years have been very... I mean, if we look at Moench's whole canon, they've been a lot more straight-laced and a lot more conventional in writing. And it is, as you say, once he gets into these interesting characters like Stained Glass Scarlet and it being very cerebral, rather than... This is very much just an action-adventure, isn't it? There's really not much psychological... dramas in it, or any...
Yeah, it goes from like swashbuckling action adventure to just beating up crooks on the street kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And there's in New York, there's really not much happening. Of course, just his dexterity, which you pointed out earlier in the Facebook group. Moon Knight, for a heavyweight boxer, heavyweight, he is a boxer and ex-Marine and all that. He is quite nimble, isn't he? And he pulls
someone brought up a great point in the group about that. Let me just pull you up. But yeah, basically, there was very distinct styles. Alexei Figurino.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Just call me out for how you pronounce it later. If you're giving this a listen. But yeah, he talks about that Daredevil and Spidey had such specific styles of fighting. Yeah. It's really noticeable. They obviously try to mix it up, and it just brings some really, really odd effects. Like, he is more flexible than Mr. Fantastic in one particular scene where he's got his butt in the air.
I'm looking at it,
flinging his 2 feet.
Far out. That is that would make Mr. Fantastic blush, wouldn't it? It's
even Black Widow. Look, that's some skills.
That is some skills. And we do see also, I mean, again, we hark back to the cameo appearances in and backup stories, there's that one Connor which we reviewed, remember? And he gets up late at night and he can't sleep, and he does that. He does the whole routine, like a gymnastics routine. I thought it was really well drawn. But there is an emphasis on... I think it was drawn by Sienkiewicz as well. Real emphasis on his dexterity and his thing. But, absolutely. Spider-Man and Daredevil, I can't really speak too much for Daredevil, but of course Spider-Man, with his enhanced abilities and his agility, similar to a spider, I guess, he'd be able to do all those sorts of stunts. We know Daredevil... Yeah, actually, Daredevil, I was reading in the wiki, part of his power is apparently he's got, how all his senses are heightened, Conishu? Apparently his sense of balance is heightened as well. This is in the classic Marvel powers, Marvel Universe... archives of characters. But yeah, apparently his balance is far superior to anyone else's. That's why he's able to do all these, acrobatic feats.
Right.
Yeah, but there's no explanation for Moon Knight, unless it's just his training. But seriously, anyone can train to kick like that. That image that Connor's described and I'm looking at right now. Give him a gold medal, because far out, that's tough going.
Yeah, and even that changes eventually. Give it a few more issues even, and it's really about how heavy he hits and
and it becomes into how he that popular thing now where he'd rather take a hit than defend, or block a shot. He started off. It is interesting. He started off as very much like a Captain America-esque, Daredevil-esque fighter, even to the point in Werewolf by Night where there's a lot of talk of, I'm going to stuff up this word now, is it Savate or something? It's a Brazilian form of almost kickboxing.
Do not know it, I'm afraid.
Oh, okay. Well, they name drop that, and they say that Moon Knight, he kicks this particular way. So someone obviously did some research and wanted to emphasize how masterful Moon Knight is in all these forms of martial arts. So we get that initially, but down the line, and especially again with Houston when he stuffs up his knees and all that, he becomes a very tired kind of hero that is tough as nails. Right, his pain threshold is super high. A skilled fighter as well, but you don't see him doing the jumping around, and even in this issue, there's Bushman calls out, he's dodged my bullets. No one can dodge a bullet like that. So he's almost superhuman, isn't he?
And I guess that's you got to wonder whether there was still that supernatural presence he was still keeping here, or
yeah.
Is there still powers Moon Knight has?
Yeah, that's weird because he would have had to. This is where around this time I think Moon Knight's origins gets really murky. I mean, like again, if you put this side by side with Werewolf by Night as well, how he down the line he got bitten by a werewolf in the melee, and that's apparently given him this enhanced strength and agility and everything. That can't work here. I mean, this is his origin, so he hasn't actually fought the Werewolf by Night yet. If we're going on along the same timeline, if that makes sense, because he's just become Moon Knight. Or actually, having said that, you're right, Connor. That maybe Werewolf by Night is the year one, the formative years of Moon Knight.
I guess is that even? I guess that's got to be canon in a way, because they definitely don't drop that kind of thing. But yeah,
they don't. It gets very messy though. I was reading I was reading some forums and people were saying, yeah, Moon Knight's origins is a bit all over the place, because in Werewolf by Night he was this thing, and then Moench retconned everything basically in this volume. But having said that, and what you've just brought to light, you could argue the fact that Werewolf by Night was in between basically pages 15 and 16 in this issue,
Definitely, yeah.
Between when he leaves Egypt and when he actually is just running around New York. So, interesting. But yeah, he certainly does seem to be enhanced by something. But it's just not explained, and whether Moench is keeping that close to his chest because he just doesn't want to explain it yet, or he's got on his mind, oh crap, I did the whole Werewolf by Night thing, how does that work with this? Or he's just going, stuff it, let's just conveniently forget about that. I guess we won't know.
And where do I kind of want to go from?
The Mooncopter?
I guess I'll jump into the art. I think you wrapped up that point nicely. I don't think I really can think of much to add. Just going back to a point you said.
Yep.
This opens so much, but you call the writing plain, and I definitely agree. I think it's got the touches of what's to come, but I think it's only a slight step above.
Yeah, absolutely.
Your average, boring 80s comic. It was definitely a lot more enjoyable than that, don't get me wrong. And the same kind of works with the art. It's very good art. Mark Spector has his shirt out a lot. It's a pretty nice bod. I think we can all agree on that. And, there's definitely good action, but, I picked this up on the stands. The story's good. The art doesn't blow me away. Just how much he changes in 12 issues. That iconic style and what we see in New Mutants as well. And he became such a powerhouse of the 80s. It's so interesting that it was so simple back here.
Yeah. Yeah. It's... It is true. Like in hindsight, you can pick up these things that Moench is eventually heading towards. But look, I would have to kind of agree with you to an extent there, Connor, about this being an 80s thing. It's probably on par, I think, with a lot of the 80s, like decent 80s stuff. It does sometimes get a bit. To me, it does fall in the trap of being a bit. Too much dialogue, too wordy, where it doesn't need to explain everything. But, and Sienkiewicz's art is actually, you look at this and you look at his later art, chalk and cheese, really. He's still got that Neil Adams kind of look, I think, that he's going for, which Neil Adams is very popular, Batman. Okay. I shouldn't say that. Bat-like man thing, comic, but also as well. So the art I think was great. It's more than competent, but by Joe, we get the good Sienkiewicz stuff when he really does form a style of his own. At this point, he's still very much very solid in technique, but he hasn't got his style yet. With Moench's writing, there is a lot of darkness to it. I mean, we've mentioned the violence by Bushmen and stuff, but I'd like to draw the fact on. There's a mention here, actually, a couple of times of the widows of the villagers that were slain by Bushmen, and they basically, it's kind of almost like a sex slave trade that they get put into, and they have to dance. Dance for, I don't know, for clients or people, and there's it's alluded to that they're actually in brothels as well. So, that's that sort of stuff you don't really see in a Fantastic Four or a Spider-Man comic. You know what I mean? It's Moench is really keeping things seedy side, I guess. For
actually, I think that's a point we haven't touched on. Definitely why this made such an impact was because of that. We called it a swashbuckling thing, but yeah, there's definitely there's immediately that tone that this isn't a superhero thriller, like just a regular superhero comic. And the next one is fighting like a slasher villain.
Yes.
And all this other stuff. But this issue, like you can see why it stood out, why, back in was it one of the first times we had Tommy on explain that, this thing hit, like there was only limited space on the newsstands, and this hit it big time. It got that real space because it was so different. And, Moon Knight's still not the biggest character in the world, but, back then this really was something to be marvelled at, if you will.
Yeah.
And, we talk... Oh, sorry.
No, sorry, go on.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it seems plain now, but I guess in the context back then, when you step back, you can see why it stuck around,
Yeah.
The violence, the swashbuckling in a sense, and then you've got, like, all the different kinds of action you can get into the seedy underbelly of New York that, was, a Daredevil even beat Frank Miller at this point, when we think about deeper part of, the darker part of superheroes. So, yeah, it's such an important piece.
It's almost like a mini version of like Vertigo for DC. It's almost like the Marvel. Actually, it's like the Marvel Knights, or maybe even the Max series, like a smaller version of it back then, because it definitely was distinct, and it set itself apart from the other comic books that Marvel were issuing out there around this time. Apart from, as you say, later on when Frank Miller takes hold of Daredevil and really does give him a really good makeover and a really good new kind of vibe to him, which just resonates even today. You see in the Netflix show. So yeah, absolutely, Connor. That's a good point. So I guess, were there any other points that you'd like to raise here, Connor? We do see Bushman defeated again, and it looks like he's brought in. The authorities come in, the New York policeman there to arrest. I don't know how he's going to detain him because, Bushman's he's unconscious, but he's got steel teeth and he's a killer. I mean. You'd probably
mouth muzzle.
Yeah, you'd probably want more backup. Than just one guy. Any other points?
Yeah, I'll run through a few. There are definitely some good panels in here. A lot of them back to that sort of missing background, kind of that can make them a bit more boring. But there's some great stuff in like the city bars that have plenty of stuff going on in the background.
Yeah,
and the colors are pretty fantastic. But I think one thing. Weird poses aside, I think one thing immediately gotten right here, and this is still kind of a different look for Moon Knight before, but this first issue right out of the gate seems to get Moon Knight, his figure, his costume persona in a way that we haven't seen before, like his weight when we see him smashing through the doors and gliding down.
Oh yes, yeah.
It just seems like Sienkiewicz is such a new control over the way this character moves. I can't figure out the page right now, but basically when he goes upstairs in the bar and just smashes through that door, it's such an iconic look. And that first page as we see, the figure of Moon Knight standing over the the fighting in Egypt. Like, that's just an iconic page. Like, that's beautiful.
Yeah. He does come across as a very terrifying figure, doesn't he?
He speaks about that as well. He uses it as fear.
Yeah. Strange, because he does look ghost-like. I guess that's probably the thing that kind of...
wear white, so you see him kind of coming, as we've get to see explain later on.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not like he's symbolic of a terrifying creature or anything like that. But he does have this imposing quality because he's all white, and he that was later written in by Charlie Houston about people seeing him coming. But
and just one more thing.
Yep.
That I will add is we hinted it before, but I like the idea that in between back then and now, that is that cool thing that Marlene and Mark work together to be a better person. It's such a little drop.
Yeah.
And I guess we'll have to see in later issues whether it's continued, because I kind of forget. But it's definitely a nicer point compared to a lot of other violent superheroes we kind of see popping up after this. Yeah. Or during this.
And actually, speaking of violent as well, just another point. Moon Knight has no compunction to have a no kill policy. He does kill here. I'm looking at page about halfway through where he's just come out of Egypt and he's just on that white cape, and a couple of Bushman's cronies are there. He throws a knife right into a gentleman's chest. So I guess that's his mercenary background. And we do later see, even with the latest Bemis run, that there's a lot of remorse that Moon Knight has for this. So I guess that sets him apart from the likes of the Punisher, where you have an anti-hero that just kills. Moon Knight has killed in the past, but we do know now that it's massively affected him, to the point in the Bemis run where it's deeply associated with his mental problems. So, but anyway, it was interesting to see here. I was just a little shocked when he just, cold-heartedly just killed these people. So, but I guess you take that as his mercenary background.
Yeah, I think that kind of wraps up my points for this.
Look, I don't have too much really to say other than we know down that Bushman's got a very distinct look here, and it was obviously later retconned to look actually even scarier. Because it's a bit weird here. Like, apparently he's got this tattoo of the death mask, but it becomes more like skull-like, doesn't it, later on? At the moment, it's just him with a white face, and I guess it is meant to be a skull. It just doesn't come across it that much. But yeah, I definitely prefer the more modern look of Bushman. So there's that with him. That's probably about it. I'm just doing a quick little run through. There's a bit of Frenchie here. I mentioned the Mooncopter. The Mooncopter actually looks pretty good here, I thought. It's
schmick.
It's more of a crescent moon, so that's what you want. Good to see Crawley. Yeah, that's about it. So I guess we'd go into our moon ratings here. Out of phases of the moon, what would you rate this one, Conishu?
I kind of forget the ratings of the moon. What are we looking at?
Just give us a number, or you can do a 3/4, half-quarter, quarter moon. But if you if you want if you want to do something more specific, I can probably pull something out of the hat. But if you got an
it'd definitely be about a 7. So it hasn't quite hit the 3/4 of the moon mark,
right?
Because I think back then it would have been something amazing, and how comparatively quickly, this series becomes just absolutely incredible.
Yep.
But looking back on it now, it's still trapped by a lot of the 80s,
mm-hmm.
and we've just experienced so much after. It's like, it's
Yeah,
pretty good.
that's good. So that's a waning gibbous, I guess. So that's around 7. It's just under 3/4. So a waning gibbous is just under 3/4 of a 3/4 moon. I would have to agree with you there, Conishu. I would give it a waning gibbous as well. More, I'd say, more in the range 6.5 to 7. It is good. Look, the importance of it historically and in the context of Moon Knight is obviously very, very important. So you'd have to give top marks for that. What Moench introduces to Moon Knight is really good. I found just I found the pacing, for me, it was just a little off in the fact that the story in Egypt seemed to round off quite well. And then I remember when I first read this, and then I turned the page, like, oh, okay, we've still got a bit to go here with him in New York. I wondered if, that could have been separated. And if he had one issue just dedicated to him in Egypt, and then maybe, I don't know, maybe flesh out a story, of him in New York in issue 2, and then have him go from there. So I found them to be quite contrasting, and it seemed quite obvious when you leapt from one to the other. The art was great. You can't really fault the storytelling. It was pretty good as well. The nice little pop culture there. You see a billboard for Empire Strikes Back. So, showing the sign of the times. About a waning gibbous, I'd say, as well, Connor. So there you go, Loonies. A decent score, I'd say, for the setup issue for Moon Knight, Volume 1. And we'll be getting into, obviously, the rest of Volume 1 in the classic reviews to come. Okay then, so next phase, Conishu, we actually, and apart from, we will have, keep your eyes and ears peeled out, Loonies, we will have another issue coming straight your way. Episode 76 will drop maybe a couple of days after this one, and that will be a review of Arachnite issue 2 with our special guest Chris Jones from Defenders TV podcast. But the next week in episode 77, we will be returning to our modern run, our LUNAR-PICK modern run, Conishu, and I believe we might have to discuss this a bit more off air. It is the Warren Ellis monumental issue 5.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so actually Josh Geronimo Johnson and myself, we did actually cover that in Josh's Isla Ra sessions when he featured a while back. I believe that was episode 51. So I don't know whether it would be, it would be great to discuss it with you, Conishu, issue 5. Maybe we can do something slightly different for the discussion. I don't know, but let's tick it off as, so we can just, officially have that as a done and dusted review. But yeah, that will be the Warren Ellis issue 5 from his volume 7 in our next phase. And where can Loonies find us, Mr. Conishu?
They can find us in a bunch of lovely places. If you want to email us with any thoughts, suggestions, things, itkmoonnight@gmail.com. Our website with all our episodes, links to the collective podcast we're connected with, fantastic group of podcasts and people. Newsletters, episodes, www.intothenightpodcast.wordpress.com. Facebook is facebook.com/ITKMoonnight. Twitter is @ITKMoonnight. Similar things, post up episodes, newsletters, interacting with fans, all that good stuff. The big group with almost, 700 members I was looking at.
Yeah.
Kicking off every day. New content, always there. Facebook.com/group/ITKMoonnight. Post anything there Moon Knight related. Yeah. Join in the lovely community. Instagram, Tumblr, YouTube, podcast catchers. Just search for Into the Night, a Moon Knight podcast. We're there.
Yes.
Well, most.
We try to be. And of course, just lastly as well, iTunes rating. If you like what you hear, It'll be really helpful for us if you can drop us a review, and Conishu and I will be more than happy to read it out, won't we, Conishu?
Oh, love it. Yeah.
It'd be great, but we'll be forever grateful, really, because it does help us get on the radar for other potential loonies out there. It just helps our podcast reach more people. So if you could just drop maybe a 5-star. That'd be good. Or if you drop any review, that would be really appreciated. We do really want to improve where we can, and we obviously enjoy hearing feedback. All right, loonies. Well, as always, may Khonshu watch over the denizens of the night. See you later.
Thank you, wonderful people.
Moon Knight and affiliated characters, stories and events are properties of Marvel Characters Incorporated. Materials used and discussed within the podcast are intended for critique and review purposes only under the fair dealing concept of the current Copyright Act. The views, information or opinions expressed during the podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of the copyright owners.